It's the Growing for Market podcast.
Horses make you be present all of the time. They make you grow as a human being, and they make you maintain that relationship. And that's, you can't do that with a tractor. You can't do that with a tractor no matter how hard you tried. And it's the fulfillment of that relationship that I feel with relationship with horses that makes me want to farm with horses. Aside from environmental reasons and economic reasons, that relationship is very meaningful for me.
Hello and welcome to the Growing for Market podcast, where we talk about growing, marketing, and the business of growing flowers and vegetables for local markets. I'm Andrew Mefford, your host and the editor of Growing for Market magazine, proudly celebrating 35 years in 2026 as the magazine by and for vegetable and flower market farmers. If you're enjoying the podcast, just wait till you see the magazine. Go to growingformarket.com for more. Also, if you could give us a follow and a rating, it really helps other like-minded people find the podcast. And now, let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free. It might take money to make money, but an on-farm event is the only marketing channel where the customer pays you to show up. Think about it. 30 people at a $20 U-Pick is $600 before anyone's even heard about your farm stand, CSA, or workshop series. On Farmhand, you sell tickets that instantly collect a name, email, and phone right at checkout. So you're not just making sales, you're building a list you can sell to for years. Farmhand handles the ticketing, the caps, the reminders, the QR check-in, and the follow-up emails. Free to start, you only pay when a ticket sells. See how it works at farmhand.partners/GFM. If you grow for market, you know performance is everything. That's why so many farmers are turning to Burpee's Farmers Market. Dedicated to professional growers, Burpee is now offering non-GMO seeds in larger quantities, bred and selected for standout flavor, strong yields, and the kind of visual appeal your customers crave. All farmers market varieties are trialed at Burpee's Research Farm in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, where expert horticulturalists test for germination rate, vigor, disease resistance, high yield, and consistency, things that make a difference in the field and to your bottom line. The seed assortment includes USDA certified organic varieties, Burpee bred classics, heirlooms, and exciting new introductions. Burpee's been doing this for 150 years, and they're still creating new varieties with growers like you in mind. You can check out the full lineup at burpee.com/farmersmarket. That's burpee.com/farmersmarket. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Donn, Hewes, and Becky Frye to the Growing for Market podcast. Donn runs Northland Sheep Farm, and Becky runs Horsetail Herb Farm, and they both farm on the same property in the town of Marathon in New York State. They connected through the Draft Animal Power Network, whose flagship event, the Draft Animal Power Field Days, is coming up on October 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in Shelburne, Vermont. So, without further ado, welcome to the Growing for Market podcast, Becky and Donn.
Excited to be here.
Thanks very much.
I'm so excited to have you. I should probably mention that Donn and I go way back to when my wife Annie and I were apprenticing on Kingbird Farm. We've determined probably about 20 years ago, believe it or not, working for the lovely Mike and Karma Gloss. And while I don't think I ever got to work with your animals, Donn, we did do a few projects together, including going to what I think was the first iteration of the Draft Animal Power Field Days, I think back in 2006. So that's how I know it's a great event. I'm so excited to hear about how it's going 20 years later and to catch up with you a little bit. So first, I want to ask about your farms, but I think that first I really should ask about the field days because it's coming right up at the beginning of October. It's a great event. So what are the details and what can people look forward to at the field days?
Cool. They've been going on for 20 years, almost every year through an organization called the Draft Animal Powered Network. And it's super fun. Sometimes if you're not familiar with it, you might imagine that it's like going to the fair and seeing the animals. It's not. It's not at all. It's like an educational conference. It's like going to a NOFA conference, an organic conference, but where the emphasis is on the powers provided by draft animals, where there might be 200 or 300 people that attend it, and 95% of them are there because they want to learn some of these skills and they want to practice some of these things, and they're interested in trying some of these things at home, either on a farm, on a business, in a woodlot, or at a homesteading level. So it's really a tremendous opportunity to meet people and also learn about working with draft animals. Becky, what's it meant for you?
I look forward to field days every year. It's that time of the year where you get to see all your horsey friends or your draft powered friends that you might not get to see through the rest of the year. We're in New York State, and a lot of these other folks that we gather with are from New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, even all over the country. And this is where we all get together and nerd out about whatever animal you're into. It's a great social event. It's a great networking event, and I wouldn't miss it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so important that you're doing it, because I was thinking about how, for one thing, if people don't know somebody who's farming with horses, they might think it's just the Amish these days. They might not know that there's this thriving community of people who are using draft animal power for farm work. And also because it's probably a little harder to get into. If you want to start a farm, you can buy a tractor, put it in the shed, use it when you need it. But I feel like with the animals, speaking of having done a little bit of that, there's all these soft skills of working with the animal, keeping the animal happy, keeping the animal healthy, and all those kinds of things. So I'm so glad that you guys are doing it. And is draft animal, so it's DAPNet is short, Draft Animal Power Network.
Yep.
That's good. That's also a cool acronym. Okay. So first of all, Draft Animal Power Network is a bit of a mouthful. So I'm glad that you found a cool acronym, because I think some people might want to join just so they can be part of DAPNet. But so are you guys based up here in the Northeast, or is this just like the Northeast event for the nationwide organization?
It did historically start in the Northeast. But in reality today, DAPNet is a combination of slightly different pieces. And one piece is the original Northeast connection of farmers and loggers getting together. But it's also reaching out now and starting to work through the internet, through social networking. There was an event in the Southeast in Kentucky this year that was a DAPNet sponsored event. So both through the internet and through outreach and through spreading the word, we are spreading. But to your other point, it's true that there have always been, for the last 40 or 50 years, there's been what I call a subset of organic and local farming that's powered by draft animals. And it's a subset because it's not for everyone. But there has always been a component of organic farming and local farming and young farmers and beginning farmers that wanted to use these types of power sources. And they're in your neighborhood, they're in your county, they're in your state. They can be hard to find. So one of the things that DAPNet does, on its website, it has a really neat interactive DAP map. And on the DAP map, you could click on it and you could find the people near you that are doing the same things you're interested in, whether it's a farmer, a farrier, or other opportunities to learn or buy animals or breed animals. That's all on the DAP map. And the DAP map covers the whole world. People are dropping their pin on the DAP map every day from all around the world. So that's just one example of how DAPNet is, trying to bring people together.
Yeah. Well, that's so great, because I know you guys know this, but the audience doesn't, that I went from working there with your friends at Kingbird Farm to Horsepower Farm here in Maine. I mean, that's actually how we got to Maine, is because my wife and we were actually really interested in working with horses. And so that's what got us to Maine, was working for the lovely Birdsall family at Horsepower Farm, which doesn't necessarily mean they're working with the live horsepower, but they were called Horsepower Farm because they were using live horses. And so we worked there, and it didn't exactly work out. Like, one thing for us is that we had already started our farm and we had to leave it due to land issues. And so we already had a tractor, which we pretty much reverted back to using. But we actually did buy a pair of oxen that were kind of like young, that our idea was that we were going to train them up, or like finish their training and use them for whatever jobs that we could around the farm. And honestly, like just starting a farm, it got to be too much for us. We couldn't keep up with the oxen. And so we sold those on to somebody else who wanted to do the same thing. But so that's really great that you have a DAP map, so you can find people like that, because there may not be a ton of them. Like, I mean, just think about farming in the first place. It's like 1% of the population that farms at all.
Right,
and so,
right.
I think that people farming with animals are like a subset of a subset. So it's not, they're out there. That must be super helpful to have a DAP map to find them and connect with them. So glad you guys are doing that. And I saw you have a bunch of workshops, both about getting started with horses and farming with horses and mules. Let's not forget the mules, Donn, both of which I would think our audience would be interested in. Can you tell us what kind of farming content will be at the field day?
Sure. I'm going to talk for a second, then I'm going to turn it over to Becky, and I have to go help my Amish customer for a second.
That's a really great tie-in that you planned there, Donn.
I know it. At the field days, one thing to point out is that Friday is all day intensives. It's a great way to start the weekend, because people come really committed to trying to learn something more specific, get more hands-on experience, work in a smaller group, and get some real training. And on those Friday intensives, there will be a half a dozen to choose from. They're everything from beginning with horses and beginning with oxen, to how to train a young animal, to how to work in a market garden. They teach people with the hands on the plows how to make a bed, how to run a cultivator. Same thing in the woods, how to work with animals in the woods. And those are intensives where the intent is to have those people getting to try things. Saturday's a bigger day with more like demonstrations. So a broader schedule, a more filled out schedule that includes farriers and veterinarians and demonstrations in the woods and in the garden and with equipment and with animals. But it's more shorter periods of time where each thing is a demonstration or a discussion that you could go and listen to or hear. There's also fun things like an auction and fun things like maybe a dance and some other fun things to try and make it a social event for all of us. As Becky said, that for some of us, this is our best chance to get together for a year.
Okay, so Becky, I know on your website, it says that you connected with Donn and Maryrose through the Draft Animal Power Network. How did that come about? Was it through the DAP map?
It was not through the DAPNet, actually. That was pre-DAPNet. How I connected with Donn and Maryrose, well, actually, there's like a pre-story to the website story, which is that my neighbor, when I moved to Cortland, New York, told me, hey, there's this guy. He lives, up in the hills, and he logs with horses. And because my neighbor knew I was interested in horses, he's like, his name is Donn Hewes. Here's his phone number. Well, I'm brand new to this area. It's the middle of COVID. I don't know if I'm going to call this guy up randomly. But it helped me know that Donn and Maryrose were here. Fast forward, probably 6-7 months. And I do the one thing that I never do, which is I read the DAPNet newsletter all the way through. I almost never did that. Now I do, obviously. Down at the bottom of this newsletter was this tiny little blurb about Marathon, New York. Donn and Maryrose are having this public event. If you want to go, you should go. And I was like, that's my opportunity. A public event. I can just leave if I want to. I can be as awkward as possible and then just skedaddle. And that's how I met them, actually, was showing up at the farm, for the cowboy camp out for the very first time, which was awesome. So read the DAPNet newsletter all the way through.
Yes, there's treasure in there. Well, you really lucked out. You know this, but Donn and Maryrose are some of the best people. So yeah, I can see how, like, especially in the middle of COVID, hearing like, hey, there's some guy off in the hills who logs with horses, like, probably easier to go to an actual event. So I'm dying to know about this cowboy camp out, though. Is this is it just a bunch of people getting together in like bringing animals if they have them and camping out and like you said, nerding out about draft animals?
It's similar to that. So the year that I went was the very first year of the event. Donn and Maryrose had invited two groups of urban cowboys and horse people. One group was from Fletcher Street Urban Riding Club, which is based in Philadelphia and is more like a mentorship program where kind of older horsemen teach younger people how to ride and be horse people. And the other group was the New York Federation of Black Cowboys. And that year, I don't think either of the groups brought horses, but everybody came up because we obviously have this really interesting hobby or set of skills in common. Everybody came up and camped out and, did the typical camp out stuff. And Donn, of course, we know he loves to teach and he loves to show people. He loves to show off his horses, let's be real. And so it was basically just a great way of showing urban cowboys and urban horse people what draft horse power is all about. And you make friends and you get to hang out with the youth. And yeah, it's always fun. Actually, I think it was last weekend was the 5th annual or the 6th annual camp out. So it's kind of fun to see the whole thing all the way to now.
Yeah, that sounds like an amazing event. And now let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free. This episode is sponsored by Nifty Hoops. Nifty Hoops designs and builds high tunnel systems for growers who want dependable results. What stands out is that Nifty Hoops tunnels are complete systems designed by experienced builders with the details worked out ahead of time. That means the core components are included from the start, like end walls, ventilation, doors, baseboards, and double-layer poly, rather than being added later. The tunnels are designed for real wind and snow loads, efficient assembly, and long service life. You can choose a self-build kit with guidance from written manuals and videos, or a community build where Nifty Hoops works alongside you and the project gets completed in one day. Nifty Hoops has built more than 1,500 hoop houses across the country, including many funded through the NRCS High Tunnel Initiative. They're known nationwide for predictable outcomes and ongoing support. If you're planning a high tunnel project and want it done right, you can learn more at niftyhoops.com. Today's episode of the Growing for Market podcast is brought to you by BCS America. On our farm, we've had our BCS two-wheel tractor for over a decade, and with no belts to slip, its all-gear-driven construction is still going strong. Though we originally got it for rototilling, we kept it even when we went mostly no-till because it can do so many other things around the farm. From snow blowing, to making raised beds with the rotary plow, to chipping wood, it can do just about anything you might need on a farm with the right attachment. Need to shred a cover crop? A BCS flail mower will make quick work of even the most vigorous cover crop and chop it up so it breaks down quickly. Want to stir in compost or amendments without inverting soil layers? A power harrow turns your BCS into a precise tilthing machine with depth control so you don't mix deeper than you want to. With so many attachments to choose from, it truly is the Swiss Army knife of farm implements. It's why, instead of saying two-wheel tractor, so many people just say BCS. Tractors and attachments are on sale through the end of the year. Visit bcsamerica.com to find sale pricing and your nearest dealer. Seven Springs Farm Supply is a farm-based supply company focused on serving market gardeners and has been in business for 35 years. Their catalog includes a comprehensive selection of approved for organic fertilizers, pest and disease controls, growing mixes, cover crop seed, and more. They offer custom fertilizer blending and seasonal cooperative purchasing opportunities, and their experienced team is ready to help guide you to the best solution for your farm's needs. Growing for Market listeners are eligible for an exclusive discount. Visit sevenspringsfarm.com/GFM or give them a call at 540-651-3228. That's sevenspringsfarm.com/GFM for an exclusive discount. And now, back to the show. Okay, well, obviously one thing, Becky, I wanted to ask you about is your farm. Okay, so I read that, so you're both farming on the same property, but two different farms. Can you tell us about your farm?
Absolutely. So when I met Donn and Maryrose that very first time, they were really interested to hear that I had a farm business already and that I'd already learned how to drive horses, but that I was really just looking to buy a farm. And they were interested because there's 2 houses on this property. One is the house I live in here, and the other one is their house. The people who are in the house that I live in now were planning to leave. So Donn and Maryrose were looking for a new set of farmers to move in. And, the first time you meet someone and they tell you that, you're just like, wait, we just met like 45 minutes ago. Are you offering me to move into your house? And they were. And that's kind of how that worked out. But your question about my business, so I've been running Horsetail Herb Farm for a little while when I lived in Maine. My partner Corey and I lived in Maine before moving here, and I was leasing some ground and trying to grow some herbs using human power with mixed success. It's really challenging when you commute to your land and then, all the logistics and stuff that go along with that.
Yeah.
So, like this property, living where you work and being able to borrow someone else's horses to kind of improve your traction and improve your efficiency using draft power. And it's so much faster than human power.
Right. Versus doing everything by hand.
Yeah. And I learned how to drive horses. I was driving horses for the farmer where I worked in Maine. I learned how to drive on the West Coast, and it kind of been all over the place. But so my business, more specifically, I grow certified organic medicinal herbs, culinary herbs, cut flowers, and garlic. And that works really well with Donn's system because he doesn't do any of that. He mostly does hay. He and Maryrose do hay. And so it means our horses, or his horses, have become more well-rounded as creatures because they know not only how to hay, but like, okay, she's not going to let me step on this calendula plant, or, all of the different skill sets that a horse also has to have in addition to the teamster having. So
I could see how that could work because I know one of the things that you don't have to think about with a tractor is that if horses don't get worked enough, that they'll get kind of like rusty and kind of almost like lose some of their skills and discipline and stuff like that. So I could see how, and that I'm imagining like cultivating and the kind of stuff you're doing is probably a lot different from what Donn is doing with them making hay. And so do you guys have to just like coordinate, be like, hey, I'd really like to use the horses to do such and such in the herbs or the flowers? How do you work out that sharing the animals?
It's fun. Sometimes it's a challenge. Right now we have a lot of horses, but we mostly have 2 solid teams of 2. And on a haying day, the hay is the priority. So Donn will go out and he'll mow hay and with 2 teams, and I'll try to do something else. And usually any other day that's not a hay day, I say, hey, Donn, I'd really like to disc this field. Let's do this thing. And Donn says, all right, let's do it.
Well, your question's a really good one because we do, and we learned this. So, like, Becky and I actually really like working together, especially at that level of like thinking about working. And we had an intern a couple of years ago, and we said, hey, let's share. You may already talked about this, but let's share the intern. The intern will be part your farm, part my farm. Better for the intern because they're seeing all these different things. But we realized that to be fair to that person and be efficient and successful, we had to communicate. We had to collaborate like on a daily basis, or even more than a daily basis. Like, what are we doing today? What's the priority? How can we do both things? How can we meet both our needs? And it leads me to a bigger thing that I like to point out about draft animal power in general, which is it leads you to working with people. A lot of technology, even in agriculture, a lot of things lead you to working alone. That's the nature of the machines we buy. It's the nature of the work we do. It's the nature of the economy we live in. And then our farm is very different from that. Our farm is very much of if we coordinated, if we collaborated, or if I did some work for her, then she could do some work for me. Our farm is very invested and seeing how we can work with each other. And I think that's one of the great attributes of working with draft animal power.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're right. So many of the technologies are really more like isolating us more. Like I'll just a quick anecdote. So Becky, I don't know if you know, I'm here in Maine. In fact, I used to work for Johnny Seeds, and so one of the things that I used to do was vegetable seed trials. And so I used to go plant a broccoli trial up in the northernmost county of Maine. So Aroostook County, if people may know, it's a huge county. That's the whole northern part of Maine. And one time I went to this farm and I was planting this little broccoli seed trial, because all the broccoli, most of the commercial broccoli is bred for California, where most of the broccoli production takes place. And so I would do this custom trial for this farm up in the northern part of Maine to see which of those varieties bred for coastal California would actually work in the north of Maine. And so I'm there like with a Earthway planting this like small plot broccoli trial. And in the adjacent field, there was this tractor with a like vacuum seeder running, planting like, I don't know, like 8 rows of broccoli at a time. And I look over, I see the driver hop out of the tractor, walk around to the back while the tractor's running, go like make sure this like all the seeders are running right, then run back around and hop back in the tractor. And so yeah, I think we've entered this age where everything is like laser leveled, laser guided, and you can really be like in your own little bubble where you're almost there to like turn the tractor at the end of the row, can almost do everything else and make sure the seed hoppers don't run out. So actually I was thinking, I'm glad you guys brought that, like the issue of like communality up, because I was thinking about how just all the accoutrements that you need for a tractor, gasoline, lube, whatever, like you can pretty much go buy off the shelf, whereas some of the stuff, it's just like hay or advice for what happens when your animal gets sick or something like that. I was thinking about how it probably is really helpful to have other people close by as part of your network, especially with draft horses. So that's great that you guys can work together. And I know there are a few other people with horses there in the greater Ithaca area, because I lived there for a little while. But yeah, the community aspect is probably especially important and probably really good for people.
That's right.
With the animal power. Okay. All right, Donn. Becky told us all about her farm. So can you tell us about your farm?
Sure. Maryrose and I moved here in 2002, and it was a pre-existing sheep dairy. Jane and Carl North started the farm here in Marathon in the mid-1980s. So it's one of the oldest organic sheep dairies in the U.S. And so we continued to be a sheep dairy and make cheese until a couple years ago. So almost a 50-year run, a 40-year run of being a sheep dairy and making cheese. And we loved that. It was a horse-powered sheep dairy, by which I mean we used the horses to make hay. The horses were mowing hay, tedding hay, and baling hay. Baling's the hardest part. Baling took a lot of horses and a lot of horsepower and a lot of human time to get the horses to the field and back, to get that work done. And we really enjoyed that. We baled hay that way for 20 years. Today we use a tractor to bale the hay, but we still mow, ted, and rake all of our hay with horses. And it's an interesting transition. It's possible we'll transition back to baling our hay with horses at some point. But it's interesting how our aging was a factor, but so was climate change. The windows in which to make hay have gotten smaller, and the opportunities for us to make the kind of hay we don't make baleage, we don't put it in plastic, we don't put it in a silo. It has to be dry. And those windows of opportunity are small, especially when horses don't mow the whole field in one day. They mow a piece today and another piece next week. And so with the tractor baling, we're gaining a little bit of time where the horses might be raking while the tractor's baling. So we're speeding up our process a little bit. It's kind of sad, but also nice. I always look at the tractor. This is what you call mixed power. This is what draft animal powered people call mixed power, when you mix the tractor and the horses together on the same farm. And I always look at mixed power as, is the tractor helping me use the horses? It's very easy to slip over the edge and have the tractor displace the horses, but I don't feel that we're doing that. We're very careful to use our tractors as little as possible, to use them to fit certain niches and certain spots where we need them, or where they help us to continue. but it's, in my mind, it's always just a way to further the use of horses. An example is using a bucket on a skid steer to fill a manure spreader so that the horses can pull the manure spreader and spread that compost. So we do use some machinery, we do use some equipment, but I always look at it as trying to further the use of the horses. So today, the biggest thing happening on our farm today, quite honestly, is what Corey and Becky are doing. Maryrose and I are not slowing down rapidly, but we're cutting back. We're both in our 60s. We're enjoying life. Maryrose stopped milking the sheep, mostly as a form of retirement. She loves sheep and she hopes to have sheep for the rest of our lives, but she wanted to make it a little easier. So she spends her day being the shepherd, taking the sheep and making sure that they have the things they need throughout the day. And she raises some beautiful sheep. But milking and making cheese, she did that for 20 years and she didn't need to do it anymore. So that's just a case of cutting it back a little bit. And it's exciting to both of us to have young people here that are starting their own enterprises, starting their own efforts, eager to go out and use the animals in ways that one of the funnest things for me is that we use the animals today with things I've never done before. So we're learning to grow. It's not just vegetables, it's perennials, and you get to cultivate plants that are over your head, and you get to do things that I would never have done. So that's really exciting for us to have people here. And the collaboration is the funnest thing going on.
Yeah. Well, and Donn, it looks like from your website, you've also added a few things that you weren't doing when I was there 20 years ago. I can't still hardly believe it, but I saw you got Teamster School, and I know you're doing some mower repairs and things like that. Can you tell us about the other stuff that you got going on like that?
Sure. The Teamster School is small, but the main purpose of it, and this has been for 5 or 10 years, I've always enjoyed teaching. Teaching people to work with draft animals, and specifically horses and mules, has been my passion for a long time, and it certainly is today. And so the Teamster School is a little bit hit or miss as far as like when it's scheduled or when it's happening, but it's always available. It's available because if anybody calls me up and says, I'd like to come and work with you and learn about how to work with horses, I just say, come. And I can arrange a system, I can arrange a schedule, I can arrange a payment system that might involve them helping me or working for me or paying me. I don't care. If somebody wants to work with horses or learn how to work with horses, it's always available. And then we do some organized weekends. We'll have 2 or 3 weekends a year where people come specifically to spend the weekend working with us. And Becky and Corey and some of my other Teamster friends in the neighborhood will come and help teach. So I have several people that come and help teach. And I just like it. That's my favorite thing to do. I do work with the funnest thing about the mower shop, I sell some parts for the horse-drawn mower, and I really can't afford much time to fix them. I wish I could, but I really can't. But my Amish neighbors show up at the oddest hours. And so it's a great way to stay in touch with my Amish neighbors. They show up, you can tell when they're mowing. Because when they're mowing, they come and you can just see them coming. And like, somebody's busted a pitman stick. And somebody else's, the last one yesterday, his son was ducking underneath of an apple tree and hit a fence post. So it's a neat way for me to stay in contact with my Amish community. And I sell parts mostly, but it's fun. And then the only other thing I would say about my side of this farm is that years ago, I was known for working with horses and mules. And I've kind of gotten out of the mule business. I really love mules, still love mules, but I've invested more time into the Suffolk Punch breed of draft horses. And I think I got into a couple of nice horses partly by luck. I have a mare today that was a daughter of a mare I owned 20 years ago. I have a stallion named Red Oak that I got from a friend of mine, Chad Miano in Virginia, who just, I would say by luck, because there was nothing I did to make this happen, he turned out to be a fantastic horse. And that combination of those 2 horses has kind of led me to want to breed them and sell those horses. And so another thing that I do is work with that breed. I have friends up and down the East Coast, and I have friends across the country that are working with Suffolk Punch. It's a rare breed of horse, but they're also well known for being having never been bred away from the farm. Many of the draft horses that you think of, Percherons and Belgians, these are great horses too, but some of the breeding has led them away from the kind of work we want to do, to showing and to getting tall and getting hitchy. This is by no means every horse, but it's just one of the things that has happened to those breeds as they weren't being used as much. And the Suffolk, even though it's rare, has really continued to be used in logging and farming. So it's been a fun horse for me to invest a little time and effort into. And we're fortunate, I'd say just lucky, to have a couple of really great examples that we've been able to breed and make offspring from. So that's just another thing that I've been involved in.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool, because I'm sure you know that the farm that I worked on with horses out here in Maine, Horsepower Farm,
Sure,
they had Suffolk Punches, and yeah, it's a lesser known breed than the ones that you mentioned, but yeah, not as tall, but had a reputation for being really good workers, and like you said, not like there hadn't really been bred for show. So that was interesting for me to be checking out your website and seeing that you had gotten some Suffolk Punches, because I enjoyed them. I don't know. I mean, I'm not the most experienced teamster. Like, I couldn't tell you that, like, I haven't worked with enough horses to like say how different they are, but I enjoyed working with them, certainly while I was there at Horsepower Farm. And, one thing maybe it's worth mentioning is that people may not know that there are still companies making horse-drawn equipment. A lot of them are owned by Amish people, but certainly not all of them. Because if people are sitting here listening to us talking about baling hay and all these different tasks that you're doing, they may be thinking you're raiding hedgerows, and fences. You know how people park,
right.
When they get done with equipment, they park it out by the fence. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you've liberated a fair amount of hedgerow equipment over the years, but if people are interested in this, they need to know there's still people manufacturing equipment specifically for horses and oxen, and that with you should really explain this more than me, but that using a forecart and different kinds of things, like, because people may have been scratching their head thinking about how is he baling hay with horses.
Sure.
Actually, would you just take a minute and tell us, like, how I can't remember exactly what your setup was with the baler. Can you just like tell us how you were able to bale hay with horses?
Sure. No, it's a really good question. And I just back up for a second and say to people that are asking this question, one of the fun things that we do, and not just us, but across this community of people farming with horses and oxen, is we tap into all of those resources. We tap into the hedgerow pieces. We tap into the 100-year-old stuff. It's great stuff that can be fixed and used. You can find cultivators, discs and harrows, rakes and tedders, even mowers. The mowers that I have come to love, and I've worked with all kinds of mowers from modern to antique, but the McCormick Deering number 9 and number 7 are just about 100 years old, but they're completely serviceable because of the Amish continuing to use them in that period where draft animal power wasn't really in vogue, from the 1950s to the 1980s. There was almost no one working with horses aside from the Amish, but there's a couple 100,000 Amish that want to keep using this stuff. So they manufactured parts, they maintain services, and now today you can get an old machine and fix it up. Then we move on. Then we want some more equipment. So then we move into the 1950s when equipment manufacturers were making equipment for small scale tractors. And most of that stuff was just tow behind. That's a logical progression because the tractor just kind of advanced from the horse. So the original manure spreaders, rakes, and tedders, they were built for small tractors. They were great with horses. And this is where your comment about forecarts, some people may not understand exactly what that is. A forecart is just 2 wheels with a platform and a place to sit. And you can buy them custom made. You can make one. They're really easy to make at home if you have some welding skills, or you can buy one. But the idea is you take your horses or your oxen, both of them use forecarts, and you hook stuff to it. You pull stuff with it. The forecart becomes your basic tractor. And with that forecart, you can pull anything. You can pull rakes. If it's of the right vintage, you can pull rakes, tedders, manure spreaders, all from the 50s and 60s because that's how they were made. But it doesn't stop there. Then the Amish, again, wanted to speed up their process, industrialize a little bit. They wanted to use the PTO shaft. Not every Amish does. but some did. They wanted to use the PTO shaft that they saw all the non-Amish farmers using and use some of that equipment. Well, they started putting motors on carts and things like Honda engines and bigger, even diesel engines on carts would give you a PTO shaft. It would give you hydraulics, and it would give you all these things that then you could use any piece of equipment that any other farmer was using. Even to this day, there's a horse-powered event in the country called Horse Progress Days, and it's not the Draft Animal Powered Network. This is Horse Progress Days is basically Amish. But it happens every year. It happens in a different part of the country, 6 different locations. And it's the biggest, newest, brightest horse-powered equipment that you can imagine. It's like the farm show of farm shows, but just for horses. And so my point is that the potential is there to use all of that stuff. And when we do that, Becky just bought a boom sprayer, which is a modern piece of equipment. You know, a big boom, a big tank to hold any kind of liquid that we want to spray or spread, and then a motorized pump to run it, all on 3 really nice wheels and a seat and a set of shafts for a horse. It's even custom made so that it arches over a specific bed. It's an offset machine so that it'll arch over a wide bed and have your horse between the beds and then have the boom sprayer stretching out over a couple of beds. So it's just an example of very modern technology, very modern design, very modern construction. And with Amish, you're always talking about very high quality construction. And then you can have that juxtaposed to a disc that we pulled out of the hedgerow and tightened it up. And it's probably 100 years old, but it works just great. So wide variety of options for horse-powered farmers and equipment.
And homesteaders too. Like we were kind of talking about before, how I was doing everything hand power, human power before. Even just one horse and one piece of equipment, like a single row cultivator. One person, one horse, one cultivator. Definitely we see those in hedgerows all the time. Yeah, they're easy to fix up, but it takes I know it would take me 2 hours to wheel hoe this whatever section of garden. It would take me 20 minutes with a horse, a single row cultivator, and myself to do the same work. So it's not just farm scale stuff, it's also homestead scale stuff. And these really old fashioned equipment is very useful for that application as well.
That's right. I see there's lots of emerging interests in this draft animal powered world, and one of them is homesteading, and within that, people are interested in what they can do with a single horse. Lots of people are trying to figure out ways to get that single horse to help them produce their firewood, to get them to produce gardens, and Becky's absolutely right. I mean, a walking cultivator is a great example of they may be 100 years old, but when you watch how effective they are at killing weeds, you're like, well, you can hardly do better. I mean, this is brilliant. You go down through there and kill some weeds. It's just about getting out there at the right time. If you get out there at the right time, it's a great tool.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad we talked about all the new and modern equipment that's being made for horses, because if people are out there thinking oh, I wonder if I can do any given job on my farm with horses, there probably is a way. But we bought we liberated a lot of equipment from hedgerows when we first moved to Maine, because we were wanting to farm with horses. And Maine may be a little bit old fashioned, so there might have been a more target rich environment for old farm equipment than a lot of other places. But we got half a barn full of stuff that we bought after we moved to Maine, because there's this little newsletter called Uncle Henry's here in Maine, where it's classified ads for the whole state. We would look, there's a horse-drawn equipment section in there, and so we would go. We've got a bunch of different equipment, and like I said, we didn't really end up doing it. But our philosophy was we wanted to grow 2 or 3 acres of vegetables, which is keep a few people plenty busy. And our idea was we don't really need a tractor for all that. It would be hard to do that without a lot of people, but we were we could. That's very we thought horsepower was a very appropriately scaled technology for a few acres of vegetables. And so I don't know if we ever get back into it. We held on to all of our horse-drawn equipment, partially because it was so cheap to buy in the first place. Like I think most people were selling it thinking somebody was going to turn it into a yard ornament. So I think we bought most of it for like 50 or $100 a piece. And like you said, most of it's serviceable. Some of it was in really good shape. So there's options out there. I just want people to know there's options out there, whether it's old or new. You can get most anything you want done on a farm if you want to, which actually the if you want to piece brings me to my next question, which is, our audience I think is mostly farmers or people who want to be. What can you say about the differences in farming with horses versus tractors or hand tools?
I would say the biggest difference is the farming, like knowing how to farm and be a good agriculturalist is usually the baseline. Everybody knows that they have to learn that, like when to sow this crop and when to plant it and when to harvest it. I would say for the biggest difference between a draft-powered farm and a tractor-based farm is the skill set used to, it's basically animal husbandry at the baseline, and learning how to use your horses appropriately and how to drive them and how to care for them is, I would say, probably the biggest difference. That includes realizing that, you're not going to go out to your barn and start up your tractor. You're going to go out to your barn and feed your horses and groom them and harness them and make sure everybody's feet are taken care of, and all those little parts of horse farming that are totally different maintenance from tractor farming.
Yeah, no, I agree. I want to play two different sides of this question. It's because it's one we get asked a lot. Not just us, but I mean all of us in this community get asked a lot. And
yeah,
on the one hand, you alluded earlier to something that I call the learning curve. And if you just wanted to be a tractor farmer, and as Becky says, you have to learn about vegetables, you have to learn about seeding and planting and compost and soil. But that's one learning curve. But there's a whole nother learning curve to working with animals. And if someone was to pursue that, they have to allow for that. The best way to do that is to grow into it. I've had some friends that were farming with tractors that said, "Oh, I'd like to switch." It can be a difficult switch. Once you've established yourself at a certain level, a certain size, a certain scale, a certain system, equipment that's all based on a certain space, a number of people that want to be in your CSA, those can be hard things to switch because it doesn't allow for a natural progression of growth where you're allowing yourself to learn something and then expand it. And that's really what works best with draft animal power, is giving yourself some time. That's why you hear people talking about internships. That's why you did that. That's why people have come here, is that they've had a chance to develop some skills and think about what they might like, and then think about starting something that could grow.
I think the best way to learn how to farm is by apprenticing on people's farms. And so that's what we did. And I think it's especially important for horses because you can think, kind of like you said, you can think like, oh yeah, I'd like to switch from tractors to horses. But I think there's, like the literal care and feeding of the animals is one thing you got to learn. And then you got to see if you like it, as a organism, right? Because it's 365 days a year. Hopefully you can find somebody to come in and take care of your animals so you can go away from time to time. But it's that once the novelty wears off, like, are you still going to love it when you have to do it every day of the year? It's a little different from tractor farming, right? And then you go park the tractor in the barn, let it snow for 4 months and come back 4 months later. I mean, you should probably take the battery out, but other than that, you can pretty much forget about the tractor for 4 months. Where if you have horses, you don't. And I think it just seemed like I've seen those, like, a lot of comparisons, I guess, because I was interested in this. I read a lot of comparisons in like Small Farmers Journal. Actually, I'm glad I just thought of that, because if people are interested in horse farming, there's a magazine called the Small Farmers Journal that really focuses on horse farming. That's a good resource. And so I've read like the comparisons of farming with horses versus tractors and places like that. And I think a lot of it just comes down to you got to really want to do it. It's like you can make it work with horses, you can make it work with tractors, but you just gotta like the horses enough to make it work and not burn out with the horses. Which for people who love horses, maybe they're like almost in the farming as much for the horses as anything else. But if you don't really love the animals, you may burn out faster than if you're using tractors.
I thought of what I was going to say, which is, and it's related to, you asked about working with tractors versus horses, and people often ask or wonder about the economics of working with draft horses. And we could go into detail about what money we have or haven't made, and I'm happy to do that. But what I tell, but the short version of that is this. The horse is not the essential component of the question. In other words, if you're going to have a small farm, if you're going to be an independent single farmer or work with a couple of people on a farm, the factors, I think, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, the factors that I think will determine how successful you are what access to land did you have? What access to markets did you have? What did you choose to grow? And what did you do about labor? And in other words, is it just going to be you and nobody else? You're going to be the owner operator of this farm and you have a great crop and a great market? Or do you have no access to land and no help and no access to markets? So if you can answer those big questions and you want to be a farmer and you figured out where you're going to market things and figured out what you're going to grow and you figured out how you're going to get some help, either yourself or hired or interns or community based, then you've answered the big questions that are going to propel your farm. And using horses or draft animal power to some extent is about scale. So thinking about choosing a scale that cooperates with that, within that. Again, choosing the crops, choosing the markets, choosing those things that are profitable on those scales. But the thing that will make or break your farm is not whether or not you use a horse. I point out to people, the horse didn't leave the farm because people couldn't afford to feed it. Although you may sometimes hear people say how much of the pasture they take or how much of the hay they take. That's not why they left. They left because of labor, both the labor to take care of them and how much labor changed when we started to pay hourly wages. It's different when you're an owner-operator like Becky and I. Becky has a certain point in the day or a certain point in the week in which she knows she's working with a valuable crop and she knows that she has a market for it and she knows that she has to mail it to a customer. And we're the same with cheese or lamb. Maryrose and I don't have to make X number of dollars per hour all day, every day, but we know that at a certain point in the year, we have a valuable crop that's going to go to an appreciative customer and they're going to pay well for it. And that's how we get reimbursed for the time we spent with horses. But that's different if you try and hire somebody to work for you and you want to pay them a good wage or a living wage. And then that particular day might just be cleaning the horses or trimming their feet or dragging something someplace that really didn't earn anybody any income. And the problem isn't that we did those things. The problem is that we paid somebody else to do it. And that's where that's where labor becomes an issue, not impossible, but a challenge. So I go back to the decisions that a small farmer has to make, or the challenges they face are, what is their access to land? Everybody knows that's the most number one difficulty in starting a farm today. And they have to be creative and they have to be resolute, and it's not easy. What are they going to grow? Like Becky said, developing the skills to grow these things. I meet farmers all the time. Every once in a while I meet a farmer and I say, man, that person, look at that field. That person knows their jam. Everything's perfect. The colors are bright. The paths are clear. The rows are straight. That person has got some skills. Well, you won't be a successful business very long if you don't have that. And then where are you going to sell it? Who are you going to sell it to? Unfortunately, that ties into, we'd like to live in a utopia where we didn't have to sell it at all. But where we could give it away, but we don't. We do the thing that we love, but we do it in a world that has this economic system that it has. And we all want to live within that. We all want to have enough money at the end of the day to live in the place where we live. And so there's where the rubber meets the road for a small farm. And I honestly don't think that the horse is the make or break. I really don't. I think the make or break is all those other things.
I do want to add something we talked about a little bit earlier about the difference between tractors and horses. And as a farmer, I think you can't have a relationship with a tractor the way you can have a relationship with a horse. It's like a friendship. It's like, yeah, it's a relationship, hands down. And, if you're the kind of person that can learn and grow every day with a horse because they make you look at yourself and be like, wow, I did a dumb thing today, or wow, like I need to approach that in a different way. If you're willing to be kind of put in your place by a horse, then that might be a good option for you, because horses make you be present all of the time. They make you grow as a human being, and they make you maintain that relationship. And that's, you can't do that with a tractor. You can't do that with a tractor no matter how hard you tried. And it's the fulfillment of that relationship that I feel with relationship with horses that makes me want to farm with horses. Aside from environmental reasons and economic reasons, that relationship is very meaningful for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you for making that, because that's a really good point. You can't have a relationship with a tractor the way that you can with a horse. And well, that's been really interesting for me to hear, both of your journeys working with horses and how the horse mixed power balance has changed over the years. Because it seems like a lot of people who are in horses for long enough, most farms, anything changes, I don't know, there's a few people out there who've been doing exactly the same thing for 50 years and might be like corn or soy or something like that. But I feel like most of the market farms I know are always evolving as markets change, as the crops that they want to grow change. And so, we had Mark and Kristen Kimball on the podcast a while back, and I don't want to speak for them. If people are interested in horsepower, they have a very interesting setup, and they talked about how their mix of horses and tractors changed over the years. The Birdsalls that I worked for here in Maine, they similar thing. They used mixed power with an emphasis on, they kind of like you were talking about, Donn. I think they really tried to prioritize horses, but there were a few things where using a tractor could really help us knock something else out much faster, so we could get back to the horses. So it's very interesting for me to hear just the equation of working with horses versus tractors. Well, given all that, I mean, there's some obvious answers to this question, but do either of you have thoughts or advice for people who are listening to this and interested in farming with horses and mules, but don't know how to get started?
Find a mentor. Find somebody around you who's doing something similar, or even if they're not doing something similar, if they're doing carriage driving and you're nearby, go hang out with them. See if working with a large animal is for you. See if working outside in the sun all day is for you. The mentor is so critical for a young person, not only their safety, or I should say an inexperienced teamster, not only for their safety, but a lot of generational knowledge that's not super available anymore. There's certainly resources, like you were saying, SFJ and Rural Heritage and other stuff like that, but the person has the lived knowledge that you just can't get with a book.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I like to tell people, I like to point out the fact that I believe that working with draft animals, and let's include oxen too, it's a craft. And to me, that means something very specific, as unique from technical, as unique from a technician or something else. A craft has specific ways of learning that require us to connect with other people. And it's culture and craft, both for safety and for communication and for learning. So mentorship is huge, but also just being bold enough to call somebody, bold enough to reach out, bold enough to go visit somebody, bold enough to take the time to see what it's like. Those are all opportunities for people to push themselves, come to the field days. Field days are great for people that are curious about what it looks like and feels like and sounds like and how it might be something they might be interested in.
All right. Well, I second that emotion. I mean, I guess there's a lot of ways, you can learn how to do stuff watching a YouTube video, but I think working with somebody is the best way to learn farming. And I realize not everybody, some people may have jobs or something that they can't, go work on a farm for a year to find out if it's for them. And so I'm glad there's resources and there's more resources than when I was learning farming, right? Because
Right.
25 years ago or something. And so learning from Instagram videos didn't exist back then, so I'm glad there are all those resources, but I think especially for working with horses, you gotta do it. You gotta work with somebody. So DAPMap, yes, go to the field days. And actually, Becky, I'm so glad you mentioned Rural Heritage, because Donn, you have an article in Rural Heritage right now. So if people aren't familiar with that magazine, I want to make sure and point out it is Rural Heritage. You got an article about repairing mowers in Rural Heritage this month. Is that right?
I've been writing almost every issue for the last couple of years. I did retire from another job a couple of years ago, and when I did that, I started writing about once every issue for Rural Heritage. But an even funner thing, and I was going to second one of the things that you said, I emphasize mentorship all the time, and I hear people say, well, it's hard to find a mentor. I'm open to every kind of mentorship. It might be on the phone. It might be through the mail. It might be through the internet. Every kind counts, and being present and being connected physically is important, but every kind of mentorship counts. So then the funnest thing I've done recently in that regard is with Joe Mishka, the editor of Rural Heritage. He's been producing some YouTube videos, and he's been coming and visiting our farm and taking some videos of us. And so if you look at Rural Heritage on YouTube, you'll find videos of Becky, of me, talking about the work that we do. And that's just been fun. I can't think of another word to describe it other than that. A couple days ago, Joe and I baked tartlets, little pies, while I answered horse-drawn questions. So I was teaching people how to make the tartlet because it's raining outside, and I'm baking a pie and talking about the ingredients in the pie and answering questions about draft animal power. So that one hasn't hit the screen yet, but when it does, I think it's going to be big.
All right, stay tuned, folks. So that's going to be on the Rural Heritage YouTube?
That's right, Rural Heritage YouTube. That's right.
Okay, so people can learn about tarts and horses all at the same time.
That's right. Never before.
Yeah. Well, that might be a good place to circle back to, because that's really the questions that I had for you guys. But is there anything else that you'd like to say about farming with horses or mules or DAPNet or anything else before we let you go?
Thanks for having us on. It's been really fun. Like I said, I love sharing, working with animals, and people are always welcome to reach out, find me at the field days or find me here at the farm.
Okay. Yeah. Well, you're obviously both great resources. So I hope people take you up on that.
Yeah. You can find me at horsetailherbfarm.com and on Instagram at Horsetail Herb Farm and on Facebook at Horsetail Herb Farm. And if anyone is considering growing medicinal herbs, they should listen to the Growing for Market podcast with Emily Springer, which is a great one, because the money's a lot better than veg. Just saying.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad you heard that episode. Yeah, that was a good one for people who are interested in medicinal herbs. Donn, where can people find you wherever you want people to look you up?
It's not as easy as that.
Teamsterschool.com?
No.
Okay.
No.
Read the Draft Power Animal Quarterly.
You can find me on Facebook until the day I quit Facebook. That's probably the best. I'm happy to share my email. My email is tripletree@frontier.net. But mostly you can find me here on the farm.
Okay. And does Draft Animal Power have a podcast by any chance?
Draft Animal Power Network does have a podcast. Maggie Smith, one of our fearless farmers, has been doing a podcast for a year or two. And I'm sure that if you looked at Draft Animal Power Network or where you look for podcasts, you'll find that.
And you can find out more about the field days and what the intensives are and what all of the workshops are on Saturday at draftanimalpower.org.
Yes. And if people forgot, but they're Growing for Market subscribers, there's going to be an ad for it with that URL in the very next Growing for Market.
Yay.
So, all right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on the pod. I know what time of year it is. I know it's a Friday evening. So thank you so much for giving us a piece of your probably hard-earned Friday evening. I had a blast catching up with you, Donn, and meeting you for this first time, Becky. Becky, so you're gonna be at the field days?
I wouldn't miss it for my life.
That's right.
I'll be there.
Okay, I thought that might be, maybe that was a dumb question. Okay, I'm hoping I can make it this year. I'll let you guys know if I can make it, in which case, Donn, I really look forward to catching up with you, and Becky, I look forward to meeting you in person. So we'll see. But whether I can or not, everybody who's listening should definitely go there.
Thank you, Andrew.
It's going to be a blast.
Thanks, Andrew.
All right, thank you, Donn. Thank you, Becky. It was fun. We'll talk to you later.
See ya.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Growing for Market podcast. If you've been enjoying the show, please consider giving us a follow and a rating or a review. It really helps others find the podcast. For more tips and tricks from farmer to farmer, check out our magazine at growingformarket.com. Whether you're a commercial grower or just want to grow like one, subscribe to Growing for Market magazine for the nitty-gritty of growing, marketing, and the business of market farming. We publish 10 issues per year with articles written by experienced farmers on topics ranging from tools and techniques to farm business operations and marketing. If you've been listening to the Growing for Market podcast and haven't yet checked out Growing for Market magazine, we've made a change so you can try the magazine for free. We've added a free month to the beginning of all first-time subscriptions. Try out the digital or paper magazine for a month, and if it's not for you, cancel within 28 days and you'll never even get billed. All subscriptions get you a year of the magazine, plus 150 downloadable back issues from the last 15 years and over 1,700 archived articles. With digital subscriptions starting at just $39 a year, head on over to growingformarket.com and subscribe today to benefit from over 3 decades of writing by farmers, for farmers, in Growing for Market magazine.